Hi, my name is Brianna Nelson, and today I will be building off the two previous modules in STEM integration by introducing the role of culture, community, and careers. So for your learning objectives, after this module, you will be able to explain ways to make learning authentic by making connections beyond the classroom. You will also be able to describe ways to make learning more relevant using culture, community, and careers, and identify ways to connect integrating STEM learning through cultural, career, and community connections. So now that you've been through step 1, which included the number of STEM disciplinaries and implementation designs, step 2, which encompassed the role of STEM and AF&R disciplines, we're now on step 3, cultural context and career. When we think about making connections to culture, career, and community, we want to focus on creating authentic connections. Authentic connections, or authentic learning, typically refers to this wide variety of educational instructional techniques that focus on connecting what students are taught in school to real-world issues, problems, and applications. The purpose of authentic learning is to engage students in a way that will align with what they're interested in learning, which then leads to being more motivated to learn new concepts and skills. This better prepares students to succeed in college, careers, and adulthood. If what they are learning mirrors real-life context, it equips them with practical and useful skills and addresses topics that are relevant and applicable to their lives outside of school. We might also refer to this as thinking like a scientist or thinking like an engineer, as it reflects that real-world career and application. We're really engaging students in that role of thinking like a scientist. Authentic learning looks different depending on the discipline. For instance, the scientific method is often thought of as a way for students to learn in an authentic way. Calling back to the previous slide, thinking as if they were scientists. This focuses on creating and testing hypotheses typically. For engineering, this may look like problem development and be a lot more solution-oriented rather than phenomena exploration. In order to outline and measure authentic learning, since they're all very different depending on the discipline, one possible option is to use the 5 standards of authentic instruction. The 5 standards include higher-order thinking, or requiring students to manipulate information and ideas in ways that transform their meaning and implications. The depth of knowledge, so knowledge that is either concerning to the central idea or discipline, so really is very deeply connected, which is referred to as deep knowledge, or knowledge that's not, which is referred to as shallow knowledge. The next is connectedness to the world. So this is how far it extends beyond the classroom. What is the meaning and value that the instructional context holds outside? The fourth is substantive conversation. This is sharing of ideas and building dialogue about a topic with a goal to promote and improve this kind of collective understanding of this topic. The fifth is social support. This is social support for student achievement and involves high expectations, respect, and inclusion of all students in the learning process. Each of the 5 standards of authentic instruction have both a high and a low achievement description. Further descriptions for these standards can be found in your additional resources folder. The first way we can develop context is by using culturally relevant pedagogy. So culturally relevant pedagogy is a pedagogy that acknowledges, responds to, and celebrates fundamental cultures that offer full, equitable access to education for students from all cultures. Culturally responsive teaching is a pedagogy that also recognizes the importance of students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. You might also hear this be called culturally responsive teaching. Some characteristics of culturally responsive teaching are positive perspectives on parents and families, communication of high expectations, learning within the context of culture, student-centered instruction, culturally mediated instruction, reshaping the curriculum, and teacher as a facilitator. When we think about creating cultural relevance, it's really student-driven, whether it be in their interests or in their background. So one example might be to analyze hip-hop lyrics or analyze pop culture media, things that students are really going to be interested and connected to. So one example might be this shoe on the right-hand side. This is an example of a math teacher using a problem where students created Gucci swag shoes. So they wanted to create their own shoes. So in this example, The students selected the materials that they were going to use for these shoes. So it might have been the jewels that they were using or the color of the fabric. They also calculated the cost of those materials, calculated how much it would be to assemble, how much they would sell it for, and how much it cost to produce. So they also calculated profit margins. This example is one that would be culturally relevant and highly student interest driven. So to guide this, Dr. Wong and Dr. Knobloch have developed a framework for STEM integration. You'll hear more about this in the following module. This part of the framework, the 3 C's, focuses on context, which are cultural, community, and career. This section of the framework is new, so any and all feedback is appreciated. This section of the framework focuses on cultural connections, so this outlines the criteria of making cultural connections and the 3 identifiers of whether it's exploring, developing, or advancing. For exploring, this engages students to discuss how students' family norms, values, identities, or lived experiences connect to the ag and STEM content or learning experience. For developing, this engages students to connect their various identities, cultural and social backgrounds, and prior experiences to learning the ag and STEM content so the learning is meaningful, personal, and relevant. Advancing engages students to investigate and communicate the historical, societal, and cultural implications, for example, social justice, related to the ag and STEM context. So after looking at the rubric, here's a more in-depth example of making cultural connections that relates to the design challenges. So the 2 design challenges, hydroponics and food science and safety, we can come to this middle ground of connecting students' home life and culture to the classroom through food. So asking students to create a food product using a common ingredient like a leafy green allows students to make foods that they're accustomed to eating at home. This provides both a learning experience for others and allows students to connect to their cultural and personal background. So having that student interest at the forefront. So using a leafy green, something that can be grown in our hydroponic systems, and then creating a food product, something that'll work us through that real-life food science experience, really comes together in this example. So 2 examples of this then. The photo on the left is kimchi, and this often uses cabbage and various spices to create a fermented food product. The photo on the right uses plant-based ingredients to create this ready-to-eat falafel. The second C in the 3 C's is community connections. With community connections, we can use 2 primary frameworks for this: place-based education and service learning. So place-based education is an approach to learning that takes advantage of geography to create authentic, meaningful, and engaging personalized learning for students. Place-based learning can be accomplished anywhere: museums, urban areas, rural areas, state parks, even virtually. With place-based education, there are different levels of making connections, typically starting with the self and extending outward into our classrooms, our schools, communities, regions, which could be the Midwest region, which could be East and West regions, could be counties or states, and then eventually extending even further outward into the world. So really kind of going from small or very connected to then creating larger connections. So some examples of this might be bringing students to a historically preserved farm, or bringing students to a local stream that runs through the school campus and looking at ecosystems that exist within that system and bringing that information back to the classroom and really exploring what that means, or selecting a local farm or selecting a local park and really looking at those different ecosystems. Place-based education doesn't need you to go somewhere to do it. So although it can be in museums or these historically preserved farms or parks or urban areas, it can really take place just in your own classroom or school. This then directly relates to service learning. So service learning is another way to engage students in their community. With service learning, there's an applied aspect where students are actually going out and engaging within the community. This might typically look like students volunteering at a nonprofit or a social service agency and engage in that reflection activity to deepen their understanding. So there's 6 elements of service learning. Is it authentic? So making a real community need. There's 6 elements of service learning. The first being authentic, so does it meet a real community need? The next is intentional. Are they thoughtful and well-planned learning experiences? Does it connect with the curriculum? Is it really bringing the classroom learning to life? Reflective. This supports global and ethical citizenship. Is it impactful? Are you making a positive impact in the community? And is it applicable? Does it align with the interest and career goals of students? So for example, if your class were discussing food insecurity, students could volunteer at a local food shelf or donation center and learn about hunger while engaging in service work. So keep in mind that although students are volunteering and making a positive impact in the community, it's authentic and it's real and it's thoughtful and well planned. We need to make sure that students are fully encompassing these 6 elements of service learning. So making sure it connects with the curriculum. Is it reflective to help support that global and ethical citizenship development? And is it applicable? What ways can we align this with interests and career goals of our students? So to guide this then, we can look at our community rubric. So exploring, which engages students to discuss local examples. So what did or what has happened in your community that we can discuss? Places, whether they're physical locations or objects, or groups with similar interests, clubs or organizations that relate to the ag and STEM content or learning experience. For developing, this engages students to interact with local community residents or make connections with local places, whether they're physical locations or objects, or groups with similar interests, whether they're clubs or organizations that are within your community. For advancing, this engages students to take action by solving a real-world problem or issue in the local community based on an integrated STEM learning experience, for example, service learning or place-based learning. So if we look at our food insecurity example, we might relate this to our hydroponic system. If we calculate how much food can be grown from these systems, we can take real-world action by donating this food to our local food shelves or providing this food to our local cafeterias or schools, since students in our own communities might be food insecure. So this really relates to the STEM learning experience that we're implementing, but also by taking that real-world action. So to make further community connections using place-based education, connections can really be made starting in the classroom and extending to their school, community, and eventually the world. So by starting small within your own classroom, for example, a teacher might invite a local farmer or a local producer who uses hydroponic systems to talk about their career and what they do and what their daily life is like and how it kind of relates to them. Then students might go on a tour of this facility or their farm to gain this firsthand knowledge and experience. And then following the experience, the teacher might have students explore a topic, again like hunger or food insecurity, and conduct an impact investigation based on what they learned. So they might look at, again, back to our previous example, look at how much food can be produced from these farms or from these hydroponic facilities, and then look at how many students in their schools or school corporations are food insecure. And then look at how many students they might be able to impact using this knowledge. Another way to add context to your lesson is to bring in career connections. So the importance of this really lies in the sheer number of demand and availability of STEM careers needed in the coming years. So between 2020 and 2025, there is an expected 18,400 job openings that are expected in the STEM fields. Employment opportunities in food and biomaterials production and the education, communications, and government service sectors account for 13 and 14%, respectively, of jobs available for new college graduates in food, agriculture, renewable resources, and the environment. So although the graph on the right depicts business as the largest sector that's in demand, there is an expected decline in the demand for these jobs as the demand for STEM careers continues to grow rapidly. So not just science and engineering, but also food and biomaterials and communication and education and government. Specific to ag, food, and natural resource career connections, the Council for Agricultural Education has created the AFNR Career Cluster Content Standards, which provides educators with a guide of what students should know and be able to do after completing a program of study in one of the AFNR career pathways. So this really focuses on those career-ready practices and content standards, our AFNR cluster skills, and then our AFNR career pathways, which include the agribusiness systems, plant systems, animal systems, biotechnology systems, natural resource systems, food products and processing, environmental service systems, and power structural and technical systems. The outline content standards also have crosswalks that relate to the areas outside of AF&R. These include Common Core English Language Arts, Common Core Mathematics, Next Generation Science Standards, Green Sustainability Knowledge and Skill Statements, and National Standards for Financial Literacy. So this really extends beyond just being related to AF&R and extends to all areas of education. So then to guide this, we come to our final section of the 3 C's of our rubric. Making career connections. So for exploring, this engages students to discuss career examples related to ag and STEM content or learning experiences. For developing, this really engages students to interact with ag and STEM professionals or make connections with professionals in the real world. For advancing, this engages students to take action by participating in career exploration opportunities. This could be job shadowing or volunteering that lead to continued career readiness experiences. So when we look at making career connections, this might look like having students explore related STEM and AF&R careers and how it relates. So the photo on the right shows 2 food science careers. It shows their responsibilities, the job outlook, what kind of education they need, typical employers, and this comes from a larger infographic that shows many jobs related to food science. This comes from a resource called agcareers.com and has extremely good infographics like this one, where your students can explore career areas in horticulture, science, agriculture, engineering, soil science, and many, many, many more. This would be one way to get your students exploring careers. Another example might be to bring a STEM or AF&R professional into your classroom and create discourse about their career in their field, and allow students to ask questions. How they got in their career field? What's a typical day in the job like? How does it relate to other areas? And finally, we can go even further and connect it to volunteering. So bringing our community connections or our service learning connections to our career connections. So engaging students in those examples. So now that we've looked at creating authentic learning experiences in the form of culture, career, and community contexts, let's think about 1. In what ways can I make connections to my students' background, either culturally or through their home life? 2. How can I make connections to students' career interests or bring awareness to related careers? And 3. In what ways can I make connections to my community that are relevant to the STEM challenge? For your next steps in this, continue planning. Add to your integrated STEM teaching plan by identifying a way that you can add context in the form of culture, community, or career. The number and role of STEM disciplinary, implementation design, and level of integration were completed in Module 1. Module 2 focused on the way of thinking, so now we're at context, and this can be in the form of, again, culture, community, or career, or all 3, or 2, or whatever combination you think fits best. I would like to thank Dr. Neil Knobloch and Dr. Weiwei Wang for providing content expertise for this module. I would also like to thank our various streams of funding that make this project possible. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.